Hello, and welcome to the National Association for State Community Services Programs Community Services Block Grant Results-Oriented Management and Accountability Next Generation Annual Report Briefing relative to the State Administration Module. On behalf of NASCASP's Executive Director, Janae Beeland, and CSBG State Assistance Director, Jackie Orr, I would like to welcome you to this informative webinar and thank you in advance for your attentiveness. I am Verna P. Best from the state of North Carolina, and I currently serve as the CSBG Program Chair for the NASCASP Board. In addition, I am serving on the work group with about 5 other state colleagues who have provided some level of review and feedback on this work. We are at a critical and pivotal juncture of solidifying the performance management framework, so I strongly encourage you to listen attentively so that you can be informed and provide feedback at the appropriate times. That said, our quote for today is about progress, which I would say is what we desire to do in CSBG administration and throughout the performance management framework. Progress of the best kind is comparatively slow. Great results cannot be achieved at once, and we must be satisfied to advance step by step. At this time, Kate Blunt, who is a consultant with OCS and NASCASP, and Seth Hassett, Director of the Division of State Assistance, will lead us through the rest of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Verna, and I'm confident that today we will take one of those steps towards progress. Our objective for today's webinar is to provide an overview of what is being proposed for the State Administration Module, which is Module 1 of the new CSBG Annual Report. We really want to orient you to the document since this is something very new and most of you will not have seen it previously. This is the second recorded webinar that we've provided. The first one, which can now be found on the NASCASP website, provided an overview and an update on ROMA Next Generation and the new annual report. Next week, OCS and NASCASP will begin a series of weekly live webinars to discuss the various parts of the annual report, focusing on what we've modified since the initial comment period. So on June the 29th from 2 to 3:30, we'll be talking about the community level module. Module 4 we will talk about on July 6th from 2 to 3:30. And then on July 14th, same time, we'll be talking again about the state administration module as well as module 2, which is about agency fiscal capacity and capacity. And that, as being a live webinar, will provide everyone a chance to ask questions and for us to have a discussion. Today, we're simply giving you an overview. So we have 2 points on the agenda. As I mentioned, an overview, which I will provide, and then we're going to do a section-by-section walkthrough of the module, which Seth Hassett is going to provide. So let's dig right in. State Administration Module was put together by OCS with assistance from the State Administration Work Group, who really reviewed the proposal and provided a lot of recommended revisions. The work group consisted of Verna Best, Sylmia Britt, Beverly Buchanan, Tamara Kohler, Emily Higgins, and Tikki Brown. We held 2 or 3 sessions and were able to refine the document that you have now in front of you. Key points about the State Administration Module. First point is that it is aligned with the state plan. You will recall the state plan lays out plan performance, what the state is planning to do over the year. This annual report will provide us information about what you actually did. You will be able to tell us what the actual performance was. It does track the performance of the state accountability measures, as did the state plan, and it includes reporting on the ACSI, the American Customer Satisfaction Index, both the results and the targets. You'll recall that the state accountability measures really are in 2 buckets, the development of the state plan and then the implementation of the state plan. And implementation of the state plan had 7 parts. And all of this is put through, is discussed in your state plan, and the annual report follows this. So it's distribution of funds, use of discretionary funds, grantee monitoring, data collection, analysis, and reporting, the org standards, state linkages, and then the eligible entity satisfaction. So again, to reiterate, the state plan covers those areas. The annual report covers those areas in the same order. The state administration module has 9 sections, A through I. We expect it to be implemented with the fiscal 2016 annual report, which will be due on March 30th, 2017. So the state plan that you recently submitted, you will be reporting on in the next annual report. You will also be using OLDC. The states will be using OLDC like they did with the state plan. And we expect to have many of the annual report segments be auto-populated from information you provided in the state plan. So we are looking to streamline and make this as easy as possible. As I mentioned, the state administration module has 9 sections, A through I, and instead of trying to walk you through that now, let me turn it right over to Seth, who is going to go through A through I for you. Seth.
Okay, thank you, Kate. So as we walk through the 9 sections of the administrative module, I would like to encourage you, if you can, to have available a copy of the printed draft module for reference, and that is available on our website. And if you do have a color printer, I encourage you to print it in color. For those of you who have previously completed a state plan through the ACF online data collection system, the format will be familiar. Please be aware, of course, that the look of the actual forms may change, and that OCS will be testing many of the features and may need to make some technical adjustments as we go through testing and implementing this. Also throughout, we'll just note that when a question relates to a state accountability measure, that is noted in the report, in the questions. There are notes that are popped throughout the text. And just to highlight how this will work, when completing an annual report, we expect that respondents will first select the federal fiscal year for which the state is reporting, and then throughout this process, items that are marked auto-populate are expected to then automatically download from the accepted state plan for that fiscal year. States will be able to update that information as necessary, and unless otherwise noted, it's very important to, and this is important throughout the content we'll be discussing, the reporting timeframes for information in the administrative module is going to be based on the federal fiscal year, which runs from October 1st of a given calendar year until September 30th of the following calendar year. And so please, as you read this and review that, think about it with that lens in mind and think about what available information you currently have in the state and how that would work for you in completing this report. So we're now going to start by walking through some of the key sections, and we'll begin with Section A, which is identifies the lead agency, the CSBG authorized official, and CSBG point of contact. This is really an administrative section. It's on page 3 of the packet that we distributed on June 15th. And the general idea is that the section will auto-populate with information that was provided in terms of the state contacts, state point of contact, the lead agency, and addresses and contact information, and that could then be updated if there have been any changes during the implementation of the fiscal year. We would also ask that the state update on any other programs administered by the State CSBG Lead Agency during that reporting year. We now go to Section B, which is focused on statewide goals and accomplishments, and this is in page 5 of the packet that was distributed. This section provides the states an opportunity to discuss their accomplishments and what was achieved regarding CSBG-specific goals that were detailed in the state's most recent state plan. So question B1 focuses on progress with state plan goals and asks the state to describe progress in meeting the goals that were outlined in the state plan. Question B2 focuses on eligible entity overall satisfaction. States will provide their most recent American Customer Satisfaction Index satisfaction score and the target they're setting for the next year. States received their overall satisfaction score in February as part of their ACSI survey report. So based on that score and follow-up actions that the state has taken or expects to take, it will set a target for overall satisfaction. In most cases, we expect this will be a similar target or same target or score that was provided in the most recently submitted state plan. And OCS will soon be issuing an information memoranda addressing the relationship of the ACSI survey, the state plan, and the annual report. And we also plan to provide guidance on how to set realistic ACSI targets. Question B3 asks states to report on what actions they have taken as a result of feedback they received from the ACSI survey and other sources. This gives the states the opportunity to tout what they've done in response to the ACSI survey results. States will also provide their most recent ACSI satisfaction score and the target they're setting for the next year. In most cases, again, this will be the same as in the most recently submitted state plan. And let me just say that one of the there will be some duplication in information that's provided in the state plan and the annual report. Part of what we have had to craft here and develop is understanding that some states will have a 2-year state plan and we will have an annual report. And so for some of these accountability measures, but particularly the ACSI, we may ask the same question in the state plan that we ask in this administrative module, and that's a way for us to make sure we have the available information that is critical for the state accountability measures. Okay, now on page 6 of the package we distributed, we have a series of questions related to state management accomplishments, eligible entity management accomplishments, and innovative solutions. This is where we ask the state to describe what they consider to be a top management accomplishment achieved by the State CSBG office during the reporting year. And we'll ask states to provide examples of how administrative or leadership actions led to improvement in efficiency, accountability, or quality of programs and services. We will also be asking states to describe 3 notable management accomplishments achieved by the eligible entities during the state in the reporting year. This is, I will say, these 2 questions and B6, B4, B5, and B6 are all very similar to questions that were asked previously in the CSBG IS survey conducted by NASCASP. We have decided to include them in the administrative module as an opportunity to highlight some important accomplishments. So B6, we ask states to provide at least 3 examples of ways in which an eligible entity addressed a cause or condition of poverty in the community using an innovative or creative approach. Okay, we consider that to be, important information for us to highlight in terms of what's being accomplished and potentially for public interest as well. Next, we'll go to question B7, and this is again also on page 6 of the packet we distributed on the 15th. And this is a summary analysis. This is a new a request, but basically this is an important opportunity to highlight major changes that have taken place in the CSBG network. If there have been changes such as new eligible entities, mergers, or other administrative changes, what new partnerships were implemented at the state or local level to improve administration or leverage resources and to improve services and strategies in CSBG, and what domains did eligible entities have the greatest impact in the state based on the state's analysis of data. So again, this is where we're asking at this point for some analysis from the state's perspective on what has been achieved and what are the kind of major changes and highlights that should be brought to the attention of OCS and certainly too that we can bring highlight with regard to changes in the program. Continuing in that same section, we ask for a summary analysis in terms of how well the state and eligible entities did in meeting the needs of individuals, families, and communities compared to targets. What were some of the areas that eligible entities were most successful in meeting their targets, and what areas did they experience challenges? Again, this is perspective and analysis from the state's perspective in terms of achievements or areas in which targets were met or where there were challenges. Again, continuing in that same section, other areas for potential analysis include any demographic shifts from previous years, how outcomes differed from prior years, were there any key trends? Based on analysis, what services, strategies, or administrative practices were identified to share across the state? And based on analysis, what changes the state might encourage or support with the local eligible entities? So one of the things about this is a new section. This is sort of a place that we are looking to ultimately develop over the years to highlight what we're learning in this process, learning in our performance management system and learning from states and things that we can then draw as lessons. And let me just say also that this is new. We and our partners plan to provide additional support and tools for the analysis of data, and that's going to be a key focus of technical assistance efforts going forward, including examples of analysis that might be used in this summary section. Okay, now we're going to move to section C, which is the eligible entity update. This is in page 7 of the packet we distributed on the 15th. And this is a relatively straightforward section. Basically, there is a table that was in the state CSBG plan that included the names of the eligible entities and asked whether they were public or nonprofit, the type of entity, the geographic area served, et cetera. And all of this, again, is information that was provided in the state plan, and simply we'll be asking for any changes. This will be, the plan is for that table to be drawn from the state plan, auto-populated, and with an opportunity, again, to highlight any changes in the eligible entity list. And if so, to then describe those changes. Let's now go to section D, and this is on page 8 of the packet that was distributed on the 15th. And this is a focused section on organizational standards for the eligible entities. So this is directly relevant to the state accountability measures related to org standards, as well as to the just the overall update on information that was provided in the state plan. So each state, in developing their state plan, was asked to identify either of two options. One was that the CSBG, that they would be using organizational standards that had been disseminated by the CSBG Organizational Standards Center of Excellence, or the state could identify an alternate set of organizational standards. So depending on that response, that would be provided, and the goal here would be for that to be auto-populated into the report. The state would have provided plans for how they intended to assess against the organizational standards, and there were a number of options provided in the state plan, including peer-to-peer review, self-assessment, state-authorized third-party validation. And in all of those sections, the state would, that would be provided what the response was in the state plan, and then there would be an opportunity to describe the assessment process as it was actually implemented, any changes that occurred since the time of the state plan submission, and provide an update in that section. Again, if you have a color version of this, just note that anything that we expect or are going to be working to auto-populate will be highlighted in red in that document. Okay, now moving on page 9 of the published document, we asked for a targets versus actual performance on the organizational standards. And again, from the state plan, states were asked to provide a target in terms of the percentage of eligible entities expected to meet all of the organizational standards during the year. That would auto-populate, and then our goal is to have a table under D2 in which the number of entities assessed would be provided, the number that met all state standards would be provided, and then we'd get an auto-calculated percentage that met the actual standards, and then those that didn't. Again, that we do not necessarily expect, and I want to frame up that this is just to give us a metric, a way of understanding where we stand in terms of org standards and helping to direct and focus technical assistance. But we want this to be accurate information, and if it is less than 100%, that is certainly understood, and the goal would be to establish a metric and then be able to set future targets based on that. Moving to, on the same page, to question D3, which focuses on technical assistance plans. And this, again, is related to a state accountability measure, but the question simply asks, did the state have in place technical assistance plans, sometimes referred to as TAPs, or quality improvement plans for all the eligible entities with unmet organizational standards? Okay, now we're going to move to section E, which is focused on the state use of funds. And this is really a critical section and one that we would really encourage people to look at closely and want to make sure that, A, the information that we're asking for is reasonable, can be provided, and keep in mind that, as I shared earlier, we're talking about a focus on a federal fiscal year in terms of the reporting information. And so we really are going to want to have feedback about how that will work from a state's perspective, the feasibility, what would need to be in place in terms of any systems, because we know that states do operate on a variety of sometimes state fiscal years, calendar years, or federal fiscal years. But for us to have a consistent picture, the goal here, and because the state plan was based on a federal fiscal year, this is currently developed and written with the expectation that information will be provided based on the federal fiscal year. So question E1 simply describes any changes in the distribution formula for CSBG eligible entities. If this is a no, then there would be no need to respond further. E2 is a table that would take some information from the state plan and then ask for planned versus actual distribution of what we refer to as the 90% funds. These are the funds that the state is required by statute to distribute to the eligible entities in the state, the community action agencies or other eligible entities, according to a state formula. So the table would be auto-populated in terms of, again, the eligible entity list that had been provided in the state plan and updated in the earlier eligible entity section would be populated, and then information from the cell from the state plan would be auto-populated in terms of the either funding amount or percentage that was going to be allocated in the state plan for each entity. Now, in the realm of actual expenditures here, we are asking for two types of information. One is the year-long allocation. How much money was each eligible entity allocated according to the state formula? The next column is in the realm of obligations, and we're asking for the actual dollar amount obligated to each eligible entity through contracts or subawards for the period covered in the fiscal year. Now, you may ask why we have these two different sections in this area. One is that there are situations, many situations, where a contract may have been held, funds may have, there may be negotiation with regard to an element of a contract. So this is a way of having a picture of how much each entity would receive under the state formula, and then how much has been obligated, again, from that federal fiscal year amount. And as we go to a later section, you'll note that this is important for us to have a good roll-up of expenditures or obligations in major categories during the fiscal year. So on question E3, which is on page 11 of the package, there is a question with regard to the actual distribution time frame. It starts on page 10 and moves to page 11, and this is related to an accountability measure as well. And the question is, did the state make funds available to eligible entities no later than 30 days after OCS distributed the federal award? And if no, then the question is, did the state implement procedures to ensure funds were made available to eligible entities consistently and without interruption? And that is what we would just, that is there's a eligibility, accountability measure that indicates, again, either that states would make funds available within that 30-day time frame or would have in place procedures to make funds available consistently and without interruption, because there are different mechanisms for distributing funds among different states. And then there's an opportunity for further explanation if that did not occur. Section E4 discusses what amount of funds the state obligated made available for its administrative funds. And again, we would auto-populate either a percentage or a number from the state plan as accepted. And then there would be, in the far right column, an opportunity to indicate the actual amount that was obligated during the fiscal year. Question E5, again, this is something that has been routinely asked in the CSBG IS, as have most of these questions, perhaps in a little bit different format. But E5 is a question about how many staff positions were funded in whole or part with CSBG funds at the state level under the state plan. And just to keep in mind, we asked that question in the state plan, and so we're asking basically for the plan versus actual, how many FTEs, how many positions were filled, were supported. The next question, E6, actually goes to how many full-time equivalents were funded with CSBG funds under the state plan. And then question E7 asks to describe how the state used its remainder or discretionary funds. This is a table that would, these are categories. The table is has the exact same categories that were included in the state plan. And these items that are in question E7 relating to potential remainder uses, training and technical assistance, coordination of state-operated programs and local programs, et cetera. Each of these is actually an item that is specifically identified in the CSBG Act as an allowable use of remainder or discretionary funds. The last one is other activities that can be specified. So in the state plan, the state was asked to either give a percentage or dollar amount. Now for the annual report, we are asking for the actual amount that was obligated in the federal fiscal year. And then there is a far right column that provides some brief description of the actual activities that were implemented. Now, question E8, which is on page 13 of the packet that was distributed on the 15th, asks what types of organizations, if any, the state worked with. And this simply asks, did funds go to groups like CSBG eligible entities, other community-based organizations, the State Association of Community Action Agencies, or other types of providers or consultants, tribal groups, or others. Next, we'll go to question E9. And what this table, and this is, again, I think something that I would strongly recommend that states look at and be aware of and think about what it would take in terms of providing this, and this seems to be the correct way of presenting the information. This is a roll-up table on total obligations. And what we have in mind here is that throughout this section, we've asked for input about the amount that was obligated in particular areas. How much was obligated to eligible entities? How much was obligated in state administrative costs? How much was obligated in terms of remainder and discretionary funds? And then the total of this would be auto-calculated from the rows that were pulled from this section. E9A and E9B ask for the prior year carryover and the planned carryover for the fiscal year. Now, these are things that have been asked previously in the CSBG IS report. This has been a part of the standard IS report, but the table does auto-calculate, and the idea would be that after the first year, we would have sort of a running snapshot of the obligations in a fiscal year, how much was carried over from a prior year, how much is being carried over into the next, and it would give a general, it would be more meaningful on a year-to-year basis and using this type of an approach. So again, we encourage your input and look forward to, and can make, it is certainly possible for us to make adjustments if anything we've shared here doesn't make technical sense or needs further clarification. Now I'm going to move to to section F, which is page 15 of the package that was distributed. This focuses on state training and technical assistance. And in this section, we're asking how the state delivered CSBG-funded training and technical assistance to the eligible entities. Again, similar to other sections we've described, we'll be using a table that includes similar information and categories to what was provided in the state plan. And our goal would be to auto-populate from what was called Table 8.1 in the CSBG state plan, the types of activities that were anticipated, training, technical assistance, and various topical areas that were potentially included. Then we would be asking for the actual dates in which that training or technical assistance occurred and a brief description. Now, it's possible to add rows. If an activity wasn't implemented, it would just need to be noted that it was not implemented and perhaps a brief explanation. But it is also certainly possible to add rows describing training or technical assistance projects or activities that were put into place during the year that were not originally anticipated in the state plan. And again, that would be perfectly acceptable. Question F2 indicates the types of organizations. And again, this is another chance just to get information on what types of organizations provided training or technical assistance. And it could include narrative with regard to eligible entities that received funds and participated as technical assistance providers. So now we're going to move to section G, which is focused on state linkages and communication. And this corresponds to a comparable section in the state plan, and it also relates to state accountability measures with regard to linkages and coordination. And so question G1 would auto-populate in terms of all the areas of linkage and coordination that were outlined in the radio boxes outlined in the state plan. They would be populated here. And then there would be a narrative opportunity to describe the actual linkages and coordination at the state level, what was created or maintained to ensure increased access to CSBG services for low-income people and communities. So G1A is, again, a narrative section, and again, based on the areas that the state had identified for its linkages and communications. Question G2 is a follow-up again about linkages and particularly the activities that the state created to support linkages and coordination at the local level. And again, this is very comparable to a response from the question 9.2 from the CSBG state plan, and the state would review this and then update and provide, a narrative on the actual activities, any explanation sort of changed or what emerged or changed from the original state plan. Question G3 focuses on eligible entity linkages and communications and coordination. And again, these are items that were actually assurances in the state plan, and we have not included in the annual report all of the items that are assurances in the state plan, but certain critical items are included, and again, they're auto-populated with what was the response that was provided in the state plan for that particular assurance or question, and then the state would have the opportunity to update and provide narrative on the actual activities and include an explanation of any changes from the original state plan. One of the critical areas, G4, is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, and particularly this is an area that we would be asking for an update from those states that had a combined WIOA state plan. We would just be asking for an administrative update on the state level WIOA plan coordination for those states with combined plans, and rather than and we're not asking for outcomes on the local level. This is intended to be an administrative update on the coordination at the state level in terms of a WIOA combined plan and how that process was implemented. So that's, again, on page, that particular question is on page 18 of the package we distributed. All right, section G focuses on further input on state linkages and communications. This is question G5 and talks about coordination among eligible entities and the State Community Action Association. And we're asking to describe state activities that took place to support coordination among the eligible entities and the Community Action Association, and then feedback to eligible entities and the State Community Action Agency Association, and how the state either provided or plans to provide feedback to local eligible entities regarding performance on state accountability measures. So again, all of these sections, our intent is to take information that was provided in the state plan, allow it to be reviewed, and then to give an opportunity for updating on terms of any changes or what happened in the actual implementation. Next, we move to Section H, Monitoring, Corrective Action, and Fiscal Controls. This section corresponds to a monitoring section in the state plan. It, again, similar to other sections, uses a table that would, in which the state had provided a plan of its monitoring plan for the fiscal year, and that table allowed the state to identify types of reviews, whether they were going to be the full on-site monitoring that's required once every 3 years, a monitoring of a newly designated eligible entity, a follow-up, or other. And the idea here is we would just ask for the actual date the visits occurred, and then if this was a visit was part of the routine monitoring plan, then minimal information would need to be provided we would not be asking the state to outline findings but simply to indicate the purpose of the visit. If there were additional monitoring visits that were not included in the original state plan, there would be an add a row function, and so the state could add additional monitoring, again, a full on-site monitoring, a newly designated monitoring, follow-up, or other. It could be a special issue. We're not asking for the findings in this report. We're simply asking for a brief description of the purpose. Now, there would be a question regarding H2 regarding any modifications made to the state's monitoring policies, and then H3, were the monitoring reports distributed within the time frames outlined in state procedures. That's related to an accountability measure. Question H4 is also related to an accountability measure, and it asks whether eligible entities on quality improvement plans resolved within the schedule agreed upon by the state and the eligible entity, and if not, just requests a brief explanation. Question H5 asks whether the state reported on all eligible entities, reported all eligible entities on quality improvement plans to OCS within 30 days of the state approving the QIP or quality improvement plan. Question H6 is focused on a new table that would just outline single audit review, outlining what audits, the audit numbers of any eligible entity audits that were reviewed from the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, and discusses was a state management decision required, was it issued within 6 months, and the date that it was issued. This is a new question. It does relate to accountability measure and to a requirement under Uniform Administrative Standards, but it is an item that is new, and we're very open to and do expect to get some input about this and may make adjustments or modifications to the table if needed. So H7 just asks then to outline and describe any management decisions issued according to state procedures with regard to the eligible entity single audit. Last section in the administrative module is Section I, Results-Oriented Management and Accountability ROMA System. And this is not this is a administrative update that talks about the performance management system that is used by the state. And so in the state plan, the state was given the option, this is again on page 22 of the packet that was distributed on the 15th. In the state plan, states were permitted to identify what performance measurement system they and the entities would be participating as required under the CSBG Act. They could choose the ROMA system, Results-Oriented Management and Accountability. They could also choose another performance management system, an alternate system for measuring performance and results. For the most part, states that submitted plans did select ROMA, and in ROMA, if ROMA was selected, then there are opportunities to describe any changes or updates in the procedures or data collection systems, and how the state supported ROMA implementation, how the state validated that the entities used data to improve service delivery. This is about describing the state's process, the state's ROMA process, how it's implemented. This is not about the provision of the data, but how the state conducted the process and provided feedback as necessary in meeting ROMA goals. So as we've outlined, this is the purpose of this particular webinar was simply to walk through the different sections to help because this is a new document, to help state CSBG officials and contacts who would be involved in completing the report to become familiar with the document. And we do intend and expect to have a follow-up webinar July 14th. This will be a live webinar covering the administration and agency fiscal capacity modules of the draft report. And during that, there will be chat functions or opportunities for some Q's and A's. So what I would encourage is we won't be going through each section in the level of detail that we've done today. So I certainly encourage, and we would encourage anyone who's participating to have participated in this webinar in advance of the July 14th live webinar. So at this time, again, we will conclude the webinar. We thank you for your participation, and we look forward to working with you in getting comments, getting input, and in ultimately in the implementation of this important new effort. Thanks very much.